Thank you very much for the confirmation. So I welcome everybody to my speech today with a little bit provocative title, but I think that application security is in many cases really provocative, especially when we talk about cyber attacks then as a result of problems in application security. And to start it off, I will start it off where my journey with technology began. And it was not a few years ago with all the nice gadgets that we have today. So mobility back then was written a little bit differently than today. High resolution was just 16-bit, and we were still talking in kilobytes rather than in terabytes, as we do today in cloud security or even at home. But as this technology evolved, also the cyber attacks evolved, also the attackers evolved. If we just look at the points on where malware was in the past, malware was visible, right? It was in your face. It wanted to tell you, hey, you are infected. The malware writers, they were after fame. They wanted to tell you, I have the knowledge to attack you. Or we're using resources of other computers or networks in order to download videos and music. So the point was not monetization, it was fame. However, when this technology evolved even further, when almost everybody started to have a personal computer and so on, the cyber criminal community started to also see advantages in attacking those resources, either to abuse them for their gain, and here they also started then to hide behind encrypted malware, behind encrypted names. However, the point also started to change, right? The computer needs to be running in order to be your zombie computer, and therefore the infection was also hidden. So every access point was used, and the attackers wanted to be run on those computers for the longest time possible. And this hasn't changed. However, we've seen that the motivation for malware attacks has shifted from pure fame into money, hacktivism, political backgrounds. And here we also see that today's most attacks are connected to money. We see that ransomware is the name of the game, and that every possible software tries to be exploited. Of course, if it has big name, it will for sure have more interest. And this is all because of what was already before mentioned. We are today interconnected, right? Today, it's not anymore about my computer on the desk, but it's also about the car. It's also about my phone, my smartwatch. It's the camera systems, and everything is interconnected into one network. And this one network then also poses our infrastructure, our smart infrastructure where we live in. However, if we put some names into those infrastructures, then we can see that those infrastructures were already at attack point many years ago. So this is not happening today. This was already happening. So how come that we can still not get it right? Right? We understand that the centerpiece of modern life is technology, and that everything runs on software. However, we still are treating this software, when we are putting it in our infrastructure, when we are releasing it, as if it would be something that is not attackable, right? We are treating software development even as if it would be the software development in the past. We had in the past a few networks to worry about. We had only proprietary code in most of cases, right? The release cycles were slow. If we imagine where we are today, we try to compensate everything with DevOps. right? Coming from a pure waterfall model to get the most out of the user experience and everything. But somehow we are still lacking to understand where the security fits into this picture, right? Who is responsible for this security? And the whole, how should I say, complexity of today's development, of today's systems, today's applications that are running either on the front end, back end, wherever they are running, is then causing us to move in different directions. We need to have those things in mind when talking about application security. Synopsys also has a research center, and we do regular researches. And this is one of them when we researched a few mobile applications from the app stores, right? And we saw that out of the 3,000 downloaded applications, we found 782 vulnerabilities, of which 94 were fixable, right? So why aren't those vulnerabilities then fixed before they go into stores and the hackers can then, of course, take use of those vulnerabilities? So if we just think about how risk comes into the proprietary code that you write, let's name it just SQL injection or something like this, right? Before you discover this vulnerability, it will be days, months, or years, and those exploits for such cases like SQL injection are already published, right? The hackers know how to hack through those vulnerabilities. If such a vulnerability is missed during your development cycle, it will be exploited. Unfortunately, you will find it when the breach will happen in most of the cases. So this means that you're in a constant threat state. If we then look what risk you gain with open source software, a vulnerability again can be introduced many days, months, or years before a researcher finds maybe this vulnerability and opens it up. However, then again, an exploit will be published, the hackers go hacking away, and you have a small time before you find it in your backends, in your systems that you're running. So why then, in another report, we found that of open source community is, or open source components are really used in all software projects today. But how come that we care about license risk more than we care about security, right? There were more security issues found in projects that we looked at than were license conflicts. And then, of course, is it the lack of budget for security or interest, or even is there no pressure for security? Well, my thinking is that we put too much pressure on the developers, right? When we started with the whole shift left idea, we started to say, okay, the developers will take care of everything, so let's put all the tools on the developers and they will take care of it. But that's the wrong thinking, right? We put it to the left. However, we forgot then all the rest of the steps. And with this, we made the developers work harder. They could not anymore focus on their work, or they don't have the knowledge how to handle security as they should. The magic tool does not exist, right? There is no magic tool that will do it all for you. There is no tool that you can put your source code in and the perfect software will come out. No magic button is there. You have to take care of the security in your application, be it with your tooling that you can have then in the beginning, middle, and the end of your development cycles, be it the resolution, consolidation, and triaging software that puts all the results together and says to you where to focus on. But we cannot forget about education. You need to train your people how to work with security. And if you are not capable to do this because you lack resources or anything, take the use of managed services, and then you will be able to also fight those problems. So, when we are talking about the problems in your DevOps part, then we have to look at placing the right tool in the right position of your development process. So, putting the static code analysis tools in the hands of the developers, and maybe equipping also your testers with tools like EAST that can help them to recognize vulnerabilities during the testing phase. And this then helps us to put DevOps with security together into a working development process with less vulnerabilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Boris. Great to hear you talk. We have a couple of questions from the chat room in the virtual sessions. So if you have a couple of minutes, I'll be running them through you.
Sure. Do you have it?
The first one. Basically, you're suggesting more tools, and you say, okay, let's add more tools and more software and additional. Basically, additional complexity. I mean, isn't it a bit contradicting? Maybe because you're adding more tools, you're starting to work slower, and maybe without all these tools, you'll be faster and able to bring faster products to the market?
Yeah, I understand your point, and I understand what you mean, but the point is not about just adding tools at one place. It's about adding the right tools at the right moment so that they can help. So for example, if you're using SAST tools, right, they can help you identify, like I said, SQL injections really fast during the developers develop. And if they see this risk already then, they can fix it right away before it comes to the release process, right? If you give, for example, SCA tools to your build engineers, they can identify open source components that are vulnerable in the build process before it goes further, right? So having the right tool at the right moment is the name of the game, and not just putting everything to the left, maybe one tool that promises everything, and then at the end releasing software because we are under pressure of releasing and then releasing vulnerable software.
Okay. And the second question, this is also something we are debating in the, can't see your face for a second.
Oh, sorry, here I am.
No, not your problem. So there you are again. So basically, we're also debating on this on the next panel about the application security and the DevSecOps. The question is, who do you think is responsible inside the organization for releasing the secure software? Is it the responsibility of the developers or responsibility of the security teams?
Yeah, so it's always this search for the right one, right? But I have to say that it starts all with the management, right? The whole company has to be involved. It cannot be that only the developers are then taking the responsibility for releasing secure software. It cannot be that the security team, which are mostly then the bottlenecks, and I have to say in many companies then the hated ones, because they're bringing back problems to the development teams what they found, right? It cannot work like this. It's not an internal competition. It's not a game. It has to be a clear rule that software has to be released with security in mind. And for this, the whole process and also the company has to live this process.
Perfect. And we have 2 minutes for the last questions. I started my conversation by saying that now that we in the cloud, infrastructure security is a different challenge, or at least we are lowering down the expectation from infrastructure security, and now we need to struggle with application security. And my feeling is that application security is a little bit behind. Do you have the same notion? And also, why is that?
Yeah, so I believe that the application security did not yet catch up to the standards of today, right? In many cases, we don't even have strict security standards, what the software should have or should not allow before it's released, right? And we see vulnerabilities that just don't make sense if security would be in the foreground. So from that perspective, I think that application security needs a lot of catching up to do. For now, it was really, how should I say, not handled correctly, but I hope that this notice will now come to the company's heads, because it's ruining their reputation, right? If their software gets hacked, be it their company network or even their customers' networks, it comes back to the company that released that software. And as soon as this gets also a little bit more mainstream and seen that firewall will not save your application from being hacked, then we can maybe have a few standards that will also produce better software.
Perfect. So we're running out of time. We want to thank you very much for your lecture and for your time.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you. Enjoy.
Thank you. So excellent. We're moving on to the next session, guys. And whenever I have a question about application security or cloud services or pen testing and cloud application, I have one address to call to, and this is Oz Avenstein. Oz, come to the stage, please.